super excited. I am here and that you all are here and that we have a phenomenal speaker today. And that our church is doing this wonderful work around justice. A lot of what our sermon was about today. So we want to make sure you understand the connection between the speaker and our church, as well as what the Bible says. And so I'm going to share just very briefly. I wish that Anne was the one sharing this, but she was not being this today. So I'll be sharing this. Around the world, we are seeing rising threats of basic freedoms, including freedom of speech, even in supposedly democratic societies. Christians have a responsibility to defend our freedom to speak the truth about injustice wherever we see it. We also must protect the right to act on our values and address systems of injustice with nonviolent methods such as boycotts and divestment. We know that speaking the truth to power and will incur repercussions, including misinformation, defamation, and intimidation. We must employ wisdom to discern when important concerns about racism are manipulated to silence and opposition to injustice. Our Methodist commitment to speak out on behalf of the poor and marginalized is rooted in Proverbs 31, verse 8 and 9. And it says this: speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed. Speak up for the poor and the helpless and see that they get justice. It's been a lifetime, right? Just with that one verse. The followers of Jesus were willing to speak their truth even when those in power wanted to silence them. For example, in Acts chapter 5, verse 28 through 29, Peter and the apostles were preaching about the death and resurrection of Christ, and the high priest told them, okay, no more speaking in that name and about that man. We gave you strict orders never again to preach in this man's name, he said. Instead, you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching about him, and you want to make us responsible for his death. But Peter and the apostles replied, we must obey God rather than any human authority. That's the biblical basis for us to speak truth to those in power and to advocate for those who are oppressed. I am looking forward to hearing today from our speaker to help us fulfill this mandate.
Jill, can you tell me again, Acts, what was that?
So that was in Acts 5, 28 through 29, and the other verse was Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Acts 5, 28 through 20. So welcome. I'm going to be passing this around. I left all my wonderful clipboards at home. So feel free to put your name and your email. Thank you so much for being here.
It is great to see you all here, and it's a great pleasure to introduce my friend Steve Rohde, whom I've known for at least 20 years through an organization called Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace. This was founded right after 9/11 by prominent religious leaders in Los Angeles, really in response to what happened in 9/11. And motto of ACLU is religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. So Steve Rohde has been committed to peace and justice for over 50 years. He's been a civil rights lawyer, intellectual property lawyer, and he's written books on constitutional law. He was the past chair of the ACLU Foundation of Southern California, past national chair of Bend the Arc, a Jewish Partnership for Justice, and he was the founder of ICUJP. And he's the author of Words of Freedom, The Words That Define Our Nation, and Freedom Assembly. And he also has a blog, not a blog, podcast that he's doing on constitutional law. He is a champion of the First Amendment. So we couldn't have a better speaker today than Steve Rohde, and I'm thrilled that he's able to join us. via Zoom. He moved up to Northern California a few years ago to be with his grandkids. And he's here with us today virtually. And without further ado, I'd like to give him a chance to speak. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you so much, Anthony. You have inspired me as long as I have known you, and your work with Jill on housing as a human right is really so important to the work we're all doing. I'm pleased that I've been invited to speak particularly about freedom of speech, which I take to include freedom of protest, freedom of dissent. This country was founded on those very principles. We were dissenting and separating from a tyrannical government. And the founders, although flawed in so many ways, understood that once they had their Constitution, they needed to support it by a Bill of Rights. That was somewhat controversial at the time, and a founding father that I value that is not given a lot of credit was George Mason from Virginia. He was on the delegation to the Constitutional Convention. Late in the convention, he moved for a Bill of Rights to be included in the Constitution. Mason had written the Declaration of Rights in the Virginia Constitution. And he feared that despite checks and balances and separation of powers, that the federal government could become abusive, tyrannical, and oppressive, and that the people deserved a Bill of Rights. Well, he was voted down on that proposition at the Constitutional Convention. Many there said they saw no threat. The three branches of government would check and balance each other. There were no powers granted to the president or Congress to violate fundamental rights of individuals. Well, George Mason meant what he said, and he joined a total of three delegates, and he refused to sign the Constitution when it was sent out to the states for ratification. He said, "I would sooner chop off this right hand than put it to a Constitution without a Bill of Rights." Well, there was great turmoil and debate in the ratifying conventions around the country. James Madison in Virginia, a colleague of Mason's, was an astute political figure. He saw the writing on the wall. He worried that the Constitution might not get approved. Patrick Henry opposed the Constitution. He said he smelt a rat because he thought it would take away rights and privileges of the American people. So Madison promised that if Virginia would ratify the Constitution, he would go to Congress, the first Congress if elected, and he would get them their Bill of Rights. That's exactly what happened. A sufficient number of states ratified the Constitution. It became law, and the first Congress was held in New York City before Washington, D.C. was established as the capital. James Madison toiled away. He had 2,000 suggestions for what rights should be protected by the Constitution. In the end, they hammered out 12 amendments to the Constitution. And when those went out for ratification, ironically, the first two on congressional salaries and reapportionment failed to be ratified. So this third amendment got elevated to the First Amendment. Today we make a lot out of the fact, and I did it early in my career, that it was the First Amendment because that's exactly where the founders put it. But the truth is, it was elevated by necessity when the first 2 of 12 amendments were not ratified. And we got our Bill of Rights, and it was right and proper that at the top of the Bill of Rights eventually was the First Amendment. A really insightful group, I believe, of 144 words. It also establishes a separation of church and state. It establishes the right to petition the government for redress of grievances, and it protects the right to peaceably assemble. But the core rights we're talking about today were the right of Congress not to abridge freedom of speech or of the press. Throughout our country's history, that amendment and what we're talking about today has been violated. In fact, the ink was barely dry on the Bill of Rights when no other than John Adams, a staunch revolutionary, signed the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. Now, I have, as Anthony alluded, studied, practiced First Amendment law, constitutional law for almost 50 years. And I've had the privilege to give talks much like this for many of those years. And I've talked about the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798 as something assigned to the trash bin of history. And yet we know that it was in his second term that Donald Trump is using and attempting to use the Alien and Sedition Acts to deport those whose beliefs he disagrees with, and that's being tested in the courts. As you may have gathered already, this topic is near and dear to my heart, and I could easily speak about it for the rest of the morning and afternoon that you have among you. But I do want to bring it very quickly to this president and the threat that he poses to the First Amendment and how people are fighting back and what we can do to resist this president. The litany of what he has done is extraordinary. And frankly, this could be the first of a series of talks we might share together, because in the most sweeping unilateral exercise of presidential authority in American history, excuse me, Trump, in less than a year, has commandeered the entire federal government using the Department of Justice, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, which he wants to call the Department of War, the IRS, the Treasury Department, the Office of Management and Budget, the Department of Education, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, the newly created Department of Government Efficiency, and other departments. And listen to this, and every issue implicates freedom of speech, because as he dismantles the government, he is often doing it in the name of eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion, of suppressing the teaching of history, and in dismantling the government as we know it. He has fired thousands of federal workers, including inspectors general and commissioners of several independent administrative agencies, terminated research grants to universities on the pretext that they are insufficiently monitoring anti-Semitism. And depending on my time and your questions and answers, I would like to address the entire question of conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism and the terrible consequences that is having to our universities, students, and faculty. Trump has penalized law firms, deported lawful permanent residents, arrested and detained American citizens, initiated the revocation of foreign student visas for protest activity, largely and almost exclusively for pro-Palestinian protests, invoked the Enemies Alien Act, attacked Iran without congressional authority, conducted at least 10 military strikes on suspected drug-running boats in international waters without any congressional review, killing at least 43 civilians. Arrested and detained journalists, dismantled the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, going to the heart of freedom of speech and of the press. Retaliated against news media, both privately by lawsuits against CBS and ABC, defunded the Voice of America, literally a voice for freedom of expression for the last 70 years, and defund the Smithsonian Museum, terminated USAID, shut down the Department of Education, which goes directly to the ability of teachers to truthfully and comprehensively teach American history, unilaterally imposed unprecedented tariffs, pardoned 1,500 January 6 insurrectionists, indicted FBI Director James Comey, New York State Attorney General Letitia James, and former National Securities Director Advisor John Bolton, deployed the National Guard to all those American cities and threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act and authorize the designation as domestic terror networks, the Open Society, Act Blue, Indivisible, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles, Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, and other nonprofit organizations. My friends, this is a direct assault on democracy in the most deliberate and intentional way, and at the bottom of it is a direct assault on freedom of speech, protest, and dissent. Over 489 lawsuits have been filed against the Trump administration. It's unprecedented. And I am grateful to the American Civil Liberties Union, to Public Counsel, to scores of social justice organizations that have been able to mount these extraordinary lawsuits. Over 200 injunctions have been granted, and most of them upheld at the appellate level against the Trump administration. Yet they have reached a hostile, conservative U.S. Supreme Court. And much of what I'm going to say today is tentative and not hopeful. We are in a new U.S. Supreme Court term that began on the first Monday in October. Over the previous months and even in the summer, the Supreme Court used something known by its critics as the shadow docket. This is the emergency docket of the Supreme Court. Now, the court needs an emergency docket in fields that I care about. If a death row inmate is about to be executed before his legal claims can be fully adjudicated, he needs an emergency stay from the Supreme Court. And there are rare other instances where that's also the case. Instead, what the Supreme Court in the last 9 months has done, it has weaponized the shadow docket. It has reversed injunctions meant to maintain the status quo and allow Trump to go about his travesty toward American democracy. You know, we had the status quo on January 19. There was a Department of Education. There were independent agencies. There were inspectors general. And there were the entire panoply of the federal government that had been established by Congress and enforced and effectuated by the presidency. Yet Trump altered and smashed and dismantled all of that. What those injunctions were meant to do was maintain the status quo while those cases could be heard fully and argued and briefed and decided. And instead, the U.S. Supreme Court turned all of that on its head by staying those injunctions meant to maintain the status quo, allowing Trump to wreak havoc in the interim. Many of those cases affected what Trump did as far as the First Amendment is concerned. And let's remember that litany. He banned Associated Press from certain press events because it wouldn't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. He sanctioned those law firms for representing clients with political views the administration disagreed with. He deported illegal aliens for the opinions they expressed in speech and in print. He defunded those universities. He's suing the Wall Street Journal for libel. He extorted $16 million from the corporate owner of CBS because of how it presented an episode of 60 Minutes. He dismantled the Voice of America for being anti-Trump and radical. He's coerced businesses and private colleges to purge the word diversity from their website and ordered the National Endowment for the Arts to reject grant applications for projects that, quote, promote gender ideology, as he calls it. And he's attempted to use the Federal Communication Commission to advance his cause. These lawsuits that I've talked about primarily are necessary but not sufficient to defend our democracy. When he finished at the Constitutional Convention, Benjamin Franklin was leaving the hall in Philadelphia, and a prominent woman in Philadelphia came up and said, "Dr. Franklin, do we have a republic or a monarchy?" And Benjamin Franklin responded, "A republic if you can keep it. A republic if you can keep it." So it has always fallen to we the people to defend and preserve democracy. Lawsuits and these wonderful lawyers and brave judges are doing their job. I can't imagine the last 9 months without some of these injunctions in place to try to slow down and forestall what Trump is doing. But it has been imperative during these same 9 months that many of us have been in the streets protesting, boycotting, and organizing the people. I'm grateful for this opportunity to publicly thank Anthony Manousis years ago for drawing my attention to Erica Chenoweth and her theory that when a country, in its public resistance, when its public display of opposition to tyranny reaches 3.5% of the population, in her historical and domestic research, a tipping point is reached, and that country is then equipped and mobilized to successfully defend democracy. 3.5% of today's American population is about 11 million people. We're told by many sources with various means to measure crowds that No King's Day a few weeks ago had 8 million people. That was up from 5 million people before that. And we were able to organize in every state of the union in close to 3,000 separate rallies. We stood shoulder to shoulder with people with extraordinary signs. We are getting under the skin of Donald Trump and his minions. They were threatened by No King's Day. They tried to diminish it. They told the world that our signs were manufactured and paid for by George Soros. They've said that we're getting paychecks from George Soros for the struggle and the work that we're doing as free and independent Americans. So my message to you today is that we are in a constitutional crisis. It's not coming, it's here. The founders did believe in separation of powers and checks and balances. They would be rolling in their graves today because today every branch of our government is in the control of a single political party, and more than that, a single dominant maniacal leader in Donald Trump. Congress is not serving its role of checks and balances, and worse yet, that last bastion, the United States Supreme Court, is in the control of 6 Republican-appointed justices, 3 of whom were appointed by Donald Trump himself. I shudder at the coming docket of the Supreme Court this season. I worry they will put into law doctrines such as the unitary executive theory, that the president is at the top of the entire federal government, and that any attempt by Congress, for example, to say that commissioners of the FTC and the Consumer Protection Board and other commissions, which by congressional act can only be removed for good cause, that those congressional acts will be overturned by this Supreme Court, handing this president the ability to fire Democratic commissioners. And that's exactly what he has done in upwards of 9 instances, to fire the Democratic members of these independent agencies. So we are in a constitutional crisis. Our right to speak, the press's right to express itself, our right to protest and demonstrate and resist is at stake. And I sent Anthony an excellent memo that Robert Reich put out only a week ago with 12 things every one of us can do. Anthony requested a call to action. Many of you may have seen Robert Reich's column, What Do We Do Now? And there are 12 things. I won't repeat them now, and in your meeting and in the questions and answers, we may talk about them. I want to finish and allow some time for questions and answers by telling you that if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you have a tendency to turn off the news, if you are seeking haven in novels and poetry and gardening and grandchildren, I fully understand that. I do it myself. But Anthony knows that over the course of the time I've known him, my 4 grandchildren have been born in these very years. And my first granddaughter, Lexi, who just in May graduated from Vanderbilt University, Lexi named me Peepaw to distinguish me from that other grandfather. And I am Peepaw. And Charlie, my second grandson, now a sophomore at UCLA, calls me Peepaw. And Pete, up here in Sebastopol, soon to turn 8 years old, calls me Peepaw. And Hank, at 4 years old, knows me as Peepaw. I said in those early speeches, when it was 2 grandkids, that someday they are going to come to me and ask, and now all 4 of them may, Peepaw, what did you do back then? What did you do when our democracy was being dismantled? I've got to be able to look them in the eye and answer that question. And if I may be so bold as to say to each one of you gathering this Sunday morning and those who will see this program on video, we've got to answer to our children and grandchildren and those without children, to their nieces and nephews and the kids in their neighborhood and the kids across town and the kids across this country and the kids across this world. What did you do back then? And my answer: to defend freedom of speech and the press and the balance of our constitutional rights and liberties is to wake up every day. And in the midst of our busy lives and work and family, to do something to defend this democracy that day. Do one thing. You can do more than one. So when you put your head on that pillow at night, you have answered that question. What did you do? I firmly believe that, supported by 3.5% and then 10% and then 20% and then 50% and more, that we are going to preserve this democracy. We will do it with Prop 50. We will do it with the midterm elections. We will do it with the election in 2028. But we will only do it if we live up to the challenge posed to us by Benjamin Franklin, a republic if you can keep it. Thank you very much.
I've heard the case for democracy more strongly than that. A minute to just catch our breath. Yes, does anyone have any questions that you would like to ask our speaker? Yes, Rosalie.
Well, I saw a woman at a group that had a button and the light wasn't real good and I couldn't see, but it had 50 on the button. So I made the assumption that that button said vote yes on Prop 50. And then later, I said to the woman, I had seen a yard sign that said, defend American democracy in California, defend democracy in California. Yes, 50. And then I thought, but I know she could have been wearing a no button, and maybe she thought I was referring to the signs saying, defend democracy in California. Vote no. So I just want a quick response about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, a quick response. Look, I believe we are literally, and I said the words, we are in a constitutional crisis. We are in existential crisis. I am not prone to exaggeration. I choose my words carefully. I base my thinking on history and law. And in the face of what Donald Trump demanded from Texas to get 5 more Republican districts, and the same kind of threat with Republican legislatures around the country, California has responded. It's different than what Texas and other states are doing. It is being put to the people to vote on this. It is not being done in smoke-filled rooms in the Texas legislature. The people are being offered this opportunity. It's temporary. It conceives of the nonpartisan redistricting commission being reconvened, I believe in 2030 on the 10-year schedule that redistricting uses. And it is triggered by what's happening in Texas. So I understand some people. I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger on CNN this morning. They're troubled that, we're, all the metaphors and cliches. We're fighting fire with fire. We're going low when they go low. No, this is serious, and it is so unprecedented. And I hope I've scratched the surface today of how unprecedented it is. There literally is talk of Trump declaring an emergency at the time of either the midterms or the 2028 election. So I hope everybody will study their ballot measure, take seriously what I've had to say, and if you have a absentee ballot and haven't sent it in yet, do so by
Thank you.
voting.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question for Steve? Pam,
I've got 2 questions regarding protests, because I'm sure we're going to have to deal with that in the next 60 days here locally. First off, is a publicly owned sidewalk a place where one can protest as long as there's not a parade permit for it or police blocking it? And that they cannot arrest you if you're standing on a sidewalk. The second one has to do with what one can do if you're going to try to protest. Do you have to keep moving so they can't arrest you for loitering if you're on a sidewalk?
Thank you. Very good questions. And I would have had a almost more laissez-faire attitude on these questions in the past, but we have to take very seriously if the kinds of demonstrations you're talking about are at or near federal buildings, that there is heightened concern for the use of federal law to crack down on peaceful protests. The basics are close to what you alluded to. As long as you do not block the free passage of pedestrians and cars coming in and out of driveways, you have a constitutional right to be in any public space, and in this case, a public sidewalk. You can be in a stationary position close to the curb, such that a pedestrian can walk past you. You do not, many labor picket lines and other picket lines are often seen with people walking in large circles. That's certainly lawful and actually a little more activist and keeps your leg moving, which can be important at our ages. But as long as people can move peacefully, the pedestrians, that is, freely, you are safe. and those events do not require permits. Now, our police force in Santa Rosa, California, was cooperative in this last peaceful parade. I've become very active with Indivisible, an extraordinary group in all communities around the country, and I encourage you to look up Indivisible if you are looking for a center for your activism in these coming months and years. They have peacekeepers in yellow jackets that have guaranteed safety and if there have been any issues. Did I address your second question as well?
About whether it could be loitering style.
No.
You know.
Yeah, so I think that's been addressed. You're not loitering, you are using a public sidewalk. Now, I cannot speak for any police force, federal, state, or local, that wants to use a pretext. I hope everyone has seen or will look up, and you'll forgive me if this offends anyone, but there was a woman in a penis costume, an inflated penis, who said, "No dictator." That is a quintessential form of protected constitutional speech and protest. She was wrestled, a 61-year-old woman was wrestled to the ground. She was arrested. I haven't heard what became of those charges. Often, overreaching police forces will do something like that, threaten other people, intimidate, take that person away from protesting, and then they often will drop the charges and release them. But we have to get used to the fact that the First Amendment protects powerful, angry, and even hateful speech. Despite what Pam Bondi said, we do not have an exception for hate speech in American constitutional law. Now, the First Amendment is not absolute. I've been accused of being an absolutist. There are exceptions to the First Amendment. Incitement to violence is an exception, even if the incitement is done by words. But there's a very careful constitutional test for incitement. It is not just an angry speaker yelling to a crowd. It is like January 6th, the calculated planning, the use of weapons and violence to conduct such a protest. True threats, a face-to-face threat with the possibility of it being acted on, is an exception to the First Amendment. Words that are part of a criminal conspiracy or criminal act are not protected by the First Amendment, and certain forms of harassment and discrimination, if taken through words, are not protected by the First Amendment. So there is a set of exceptions to the First Amendment, but the broader residue of protected speech, controversial, angry, hateful speech that is peaceful and that does not cross the line into any of those exceptions is protected. And I'm going to make a matter of personal privilege, because I said it earlier. I'm deeply concerned, and in a religious setting as we are this morning, I think we should all be concerned how Donald Trump has weaponized the scourge of anti-Semitism to punish protesters and pro-Palestinian speech. You heard in my introduction that I was former chair of Bend the Ark, a Jewish partnership for justice. As a Jew, I know anti-Semitism. I have seen anti-Semitism. I have seen the desecration of mosques and direct anti-Semitism But I have also seen Jews and others protest the state of Israel and its conduct in Gaza and the West Bank. And we are living in a period where those two things are purposely being blurred and confused. And the lawful protected criticism of Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli government, as it is with the criticism of the US government or any government, is entirely constitutionally protected. Luckily, two courts in the last month, one by a Jewish judge involving Harvard, struck down Trump's attempt to defund important scientific and medical research at Harvard on the pretext of monitoring and policing anti-Semitism. And a second appellate court has just last week ruled that you cannot weaponize the combating of anti-Semitism to suppress free speech. I hope that view emerges. And here I'll offer you, and I don't know what our time limit is, a little hopeful sign when it comes to the U.S. Supreme Court. Conservatives and liberals on the Supreme Court appear to agree largely on First Amendment issues. They have upheld robust protection for free speech across the political spectrum. They complain about cancel culture when it comes to conservative college professors being suppressed. I have a small hope that there are at least 5 justices on that court when the kind of issue I'm talking about, a square suppression of peaceful, nonviolent speech, comes to that Supreme Court, that they will strike down restrictions on that kind of speech, and that they may do it in the context of conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. We'll all have to watch and see if that happens.
So we have about 10 minutes, and so we probably have room for one more question. I do have a question for you, Steve. I'm very interested what those 12 points are. Maybe you could quickly just reiterate those, but at the same time, I'm wondering if you could get your phones out and you can begin to look at one of these and sign it. I know what happens is we take these home, we forget. And so if we could take time now and make sure we do some kind of action, feel free also to share this with your friends and have them take action. There's a few copies left over here. Feel free to take those and share with friends. Also, if you want a copy, we have your emails. We'll make sure we send you the video so you can also share that with your friends. I think we can all agree it's very excellent, very worth sharing. So, so could you just reiterate what some of those points are as we're all beginning?
Sure. I'll use my few minutes. And thank you. I gather, Anthony, you received that and printed it out?
Yep. Yeah, everybody has a QR code.
QR code.
So they can get to it right now. Yep.
Oh,
I'm
good.
doing it right now as we're speaking.
Was that the sheet of paper you passed out?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
good.
It's a QR code, Steve, that leads to it. But
I get it.
Really appreciate it. Maybe you could just take some of the points and share with us right now.
Yeah, I think he's done such a good job, and frankly, with all due modesty, I think he was peeking over my shoulder at the recent speeches I've been giving. He speaks of organizing for the 2026 midterms. That's literally his first recommendation, and he speaks of counterbalancing Republican gerrymandering and voting yes on Prop 50. Speaks of working locally. You know, the right wing for 70 years had a plan. It was variously known as the Southern Strategy or the Reagan Revolution. They knew that going into school boards and city councils was the place to start, and they've built a huge infrastructure, and I think we're behind the eight ball in doing that. Organize young people to participate. I can't see everybody in your room. I know there's been a graying of our movement as so many of us came out of the anti-Vietnam era and the civil rights movement and the women's movement and the LGBTQ movement. We have to meet young people where they live, on social media, and in other settings that bring them out to participate. Number two, protect the decent and hardworking members of our communities who are undocumented. You know, I didn't give adequate attention to the entire assault on immigration and amnesty and asylum in this country. And I know many of you are working on that as well. And Reich expands on that. Help people who are losing their jobs and benefits. You know, we need those social services. If you know a neighbor who's been fired either under DOGE or the shutdown, pick up an extra round of groceries that day and share it with them. See if there are part-time jobs in your town or your community. Call your members of Congress, such a basic right and privilege, so easy to do with all kinds of ways to call the Capitol Hill switchboard and find your congressman. And by the way, and this is something Anthony taught me, call a congressman when they do something right, in your view. Don't just call them to complain when they do something wrong. Call them to thank them for a particular vote or speaking out. That matters a lot to them. Number 5, protect LGBTQ and Black and brown members of our community. So much of what Trump has designed and is implementing and what his henchmen are implementing is targeting minority communities. He's undermining our slow progress toward diversity, equity, and inclusion. Justice Roberts thinks we have a colorblind society, so why do we need the protection of the Voting Rights Act and other protections? Well, that's just wishful thinking. They want to return to the white national society that they enjoyed in their youth and that their parents and grandparents enjoyed. Participate or organize boycotts of companies that are enabling the Trump regime, starting with Tesla and X and Amazon and Home Depot and Walmart and Palantir Technologies. There are events on November 2nd and 3rd to boycott Home Depot and to be out at detention centers. Look up the actions on those days in the coming weekend. Support groups litigating against Trump. I mentioned the American Civil Liberties Union, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics. They're all listed in this memo. They deserve your support. I don't think he covers it here the other way. And write to your university if they have capitulated to Trump, if they've hinted at signing that compact demanding they give up academic freedom. And find petitions to speak out to law firms that capitulated so soon when they had batteries of lawyers that could have fought back. Spread the truth. Find reliable sources. Do what we did here by finding a column, circulate it, subscribe to the publications that Robert Reich lists here, get away from the other sources. 9, join co-workers in getting employers to resist Trump. We have a whole division at Indivisible up here to talk sensibly to employers. Know your rights, employers, what you need, do and cannot do when ICE comes knocking. Push for progressive measures in our communities and states. Use our states and local ordinances We've done that tremendously through ICUJP and the legislative work that Anthony does with the Friends Committee on Legislation. Meanwhile, keep the faith, do not give up on America, and be sure to do it in a life full of joy, fun, and laughter. Ridiculing Trump is a powerful remedy. That's what No King's Day did. That's what Jimmy Kimmel was doing. That's what South Park has been doing. If you're not inclined to have seen South Park, that is reaching young people. Ridicule of tyrants has been a powerful remedy throughout world history, and we have to keep up more of it. So, Robert Reich has given you an agenda. I've urged you with the kind of steps to take. The very fact that you're here today, you're devoting a morning in your religious gathering to these issues is crucially important. Talk to people about something. I bet you heard something today that might have been new or that clarified your thinking. Share that with friends and family. As soon as Anthony and Jill post this, use it as a convenient way to share as much of this information as you can. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I feel so grateful to our church to have this kind of forum. And it's really